In this video, I want to talk about my experiences at field day. Now, really quickly, this is not related to anything on my channel. So if you come to my channel for the video game stuff, then you can click away from this video. However, this video is related to technology. So if you want to stay and you want to learn something about technology, this is related to technology. Like I said in some of my videos, I just don't want to be a person behind the camera that always sits here and talks about video game news and talks about tech news and things like that. I want to talk about different things I'm actually enjoying in my life, things that I'm interested in, and things like that. I want you guys to get to know the person behind the camera, and this is what this video is all about. It's all about my experiences I had at field day. But if you're not interested about me and about myself, then you can go ahead and click off this video. This video is not for you. But if you're interested in other things going on in my life, things that I'm interested in and things like that, then you can stay on this video. Now, if you don't know what field day is an activity that's held every June. It's every third weekend of June. It's a competition between the U.S. and Canada. I don't know if any other countries in the world have a field day, but field day is basically a practice for ham radio or amateur radio, like some people like to call it. Now, if you don't know really quickly what ham radio is or amateur radio, ham radio and amateur radio are pretty much where people get on radios and they actually talk to one another on radios. It's kind of like CB, if you know any truckers that used to use CB. CB used to be a thing, and people, especially truckers, used to talk between each other with microphones on an actual radio. And this is pretty much what that is, but this is 100% better than CB. But basically, back to what I was saying, what field day is. Field day is held every third weekend of June, and it's a competition between USA and Canada. And what the whole primary goal of this field day is, the reason we have this field day, it's kind of a I want to say a competition and kind of a practice. The reason it's called field day is because we're supposed to practice setting up our amateur equipment in case of a natural disaster. And by having this thing every third weekend of June, then we can practice setting up our equipment, setting up our antennas, setting up our radios and things like that. So if a natural disaster were to hit any part of the world, we would be ready to set up, and we would be ready to we would be able to give our help to people in need if they need communications where communications aren't possible, because sometimes when a natural disaster happens, of course, you can't just get communications right away. Maybe cell towers go down, maybe internet goes down, electricity goes down. So we step in as ham operators or amateur radio operators, and then we take over and we make sure people are safe, and we make sure people are protected, and make sure people get the help that they need by talking on the radio and by getting help that they couldn't get otherwise if communications were around. And that's what field day is. It's a practice of setting up our equipment. You're allowed to set up your equipment, and basically everyone in the US and Canada has a station, and they set up their equipment. A lot of times they have clubs that set up their stations, and these clubs set up their stations, and the whole practice is we're supposed to be making contacts with different stations throughout the US and Canada. It's a weekend event, so it's the third weekend of June every year, and it goes from, I think, Saturday at 1 p.m. to Sunday at 1 p.m. So it's 1 p.m. Saturday to Sunday at 1 p.m. and you're supposed to see how many contacts you can make with other stations or other people at field day, and then you log everybody you've talked to, and then you try to see who has the most logs, and whoever has the most logs typically win. And a lot of people don't like calling this a contest. Some people call this a contest, and some people call this more of a practice of when we're supposed to set up. Now, what field day actually means is, field, for instance, it's supposed to be a practice where we're supposed to set up all of our amateur radio, all of our gear out into a field, and we're supposed to use we're not supposed to use electricity. We're supposed to use things like generators, backup batteries, solar power, things like that. We're supposed to practice in a real life scenario if a natural disaster was going to hit. Now, let me talk about my experience at our field day, because my city does put on a field day. It's somewhat big and somewhat not big. And overall, my experiences at field day were pretty cool. Now, usually when it comes to the field day that my city puts on, we do have a club in my city. Not going to really say the name of our club, but basically our club does put on one. Usually we don't really do it the real field day way. We mostly do it in a building. I know that's kind of cheating when you're doing field day in a building, because let's be honest, if a natural disaster were to hit right now, most likely you may not actually have a building to actually go to. So we're not actually practicing. Some clubs actually, of course, go out into like the forest or go out into the countryside and actually set up their antennas, set up their radios, and they actually do that jazz. But we don't actually do that at our club. We actually most of the time go into a building. The building that we actually went into this year was a firefighter building. It was a firefighter training facility, and this firefighter training facility is actually quite big and it's very nice. Am I going to say it's nicer than being out in the field? Of course, it's nicer than being out in the field, but I do love this building, I'm not gonna lie, but I kind of wish we would do it the actual ham radio or the actual field day intent, to be out in the field, be out with our hands and knees, being gritty, practicing for a real natural disaster. That would be cool, but our club doesn't actually do this. And why did I actually go to field day? Well, the reason I actually went to field day is because I talked about this, I think, one other time on my YouTube channel. I talked about how my dad is actually a licensed ham radio operator. He is an extra class. Of course, that may not make sense to some of you if you don't know anything about ham radio or amateur radio. And he's the one who actually always drags me out to these type of events like field day. And honestly, I wouldn't go myself, to be honest with you guys. You guys know I'm into like more of like regular technology like cell phones, smartphones, computers, tablets, gaming equipment, and things like that. I'm not really into these radios like CBs or ham radios, but my dad always drags me out to these type of things. And let me say, one reason I'm actually making this video is because I did not realize how much I actually loved field day. Field day is an amazing experience. The nice thing about most of these field days, or pretty much all of these field days, you can go out to these clubs. If you look around your city every third weekend of June, or if you just type in field day. Field day is put on by a company called AARL, I think. It's actually a association with amateur radio, and they actually put on this event every third weekend of June every year, and it's been going on for a very long time, since like maybe the 19-something hundreds. So it's a very old practice we have been doing. But anyway, talking more about this field day, I was actually very excited this year because this is actually the first year I actually was able to talk on the air. That's what makes this very exciting for me. It makes it very, very exciting because I actually got my hands dirty. I was actually talking on the air. I was making contacts with all these different stations, and the experience for me personally was very amazing. And it's not really too surprising that I would actually, when I first started talking on the air for the first time, I would actually be interested in it, because as you guys know, I like technology. I don't like that type of technology, but I'm already into technology in general. I like communications like smartphones, telephones, Wi-Fi, video games, just internet and things like that. So of course the transition to ham radio or amateur radio is going to be a very seamless process for me, and I was actually having very fun. Now, if you didn't know, guys, I don't have an amateur radio license. You do need to be licensed to be on the air if you want to talk on amateur radio. That is one thing about amateur radio. You do need to be licensed to be on it. Now, anyone could get their amateur license, and it does cost to actually take a test for a ham radio license, but it's fairly easy. And like I said, anybody can take a ham or a amateur radio test if they want to. All they got to do is find, I think, find a place that'll take the test, and you pay, and then you pass the test, and it's a very simple test. And then once you pay, you can get your ham radio license. And right now I'm actually thinking about getting my ham radio license and my amateur radio license, because this was just an amazing experience for me. It's just cool to see like 20 or 30 people all in this one location, setting up their gear, setting up their antennas and things like that. I actually love talking on the air. I actually have a clip. I can't show you, unfortunately, because it wasn't recorded from me personally. It's actually on my father's father's phone. So if I can ever get my father, I may end up throwing that video somewhere or something, because he did record me actually filming on the air, and it was very cool that I was actually talking on the air. And like I said again at the beginning of the video, this practice goes from 1 p.m. Saturday to 1 p.m. Sunday, and you can go pretty much for about 24 plus hours, maybe like 26, 27, 28, 29, maybe 30 some hours on the radio. And I pretty much did it most of the time. I stayed at our field day from 1 p.m. Saturday all the way to Sunday morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. I didn't stay the whole entire time, but it was a very cool experience. This experience actually reminds me of going to like gaming conventions or going to E3, or even just like, for instance, playing video games on the internet. Once I made my first contact on one of the radios, I felt like I was playing a video game, knowing that somebody on the other end was from a different part of the world or the different part of the country, which was cool. I made some contacts in, I think, California, and then I also made some contacts in Canada, which was very cool. And when field day hits, it is a blast, I'm telling you. If you haven't tried field day, like I said, they allow people to actually go there. And the cool thing about field day, which I haven't even talked about, is the fact that non-amateur radio operators who don't have a license like me can actually go there, and you can actually run the equipment yourself. As long as you actually have someone in the building who's licensed, they'll actually let you participate in field day, which is very cool. You do have to use, I think, the club's call or the call given out at field day, because I think each field day you do get a random call and you have to go off this random call, but you just use the same call pretty much everyone is using at field day. I just love the atmosphere at field day. I just thought field day was a blast, and if I wouldn't have picked up the microphone for the first time and talked into the microphone, I may have not have been interested in amateur radio or ham radio. But now I'm pretty sure I'm going to get my first license, and I'm going to be an amateur, and I'm going to try going deeper into this whole hobby. I think this hobby is very interesting. I just think it's very cool. I love the fact that you're not guaranteed to make calls with people. I love the fact that it could be blurry at times. You may not get signal. You can lose signal. I also love the fact that at our field day, we had a storm rolling in, so we had to shut down our equipment, and we got to use it as a storm was rolling in, but then we got a lot of like crackling, popping. We got a lot of lightning strikes coming in. It really affected how our signal actually transmitted through the atmosphere and things like that. Overall, I had a very good time at field day. I know amateur radio is something that I know a lot of people our age just don't like doing, just because it's a little bit too retro or a little bit too old for people like us who are in our 20s or 30s or even potentially our 40s. But I think it's a very cool thing. One thing I did want to touch on, speaking of my amateur license, which I'm probably going to get in the future after going to field day, one thing I do have to mention is the fact that anybody can get their ham license. It is open to the public, but you can be any age as long as you can read, and as long as you can understand the test, then you can take your ham license. You don't have to be a certain age, like driving a car or drinking or even gambling. You can be any age you want. There's people out there, like at our field day, we had people out there who were 4 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, who actually had ham licenses, and they were actually talking on the air. And I thought that was actually pretty cool, seeing these little kids talking on the air, struggling, not really talking too well and things like that. I thought that was absolutely awesome. Now, when it comes to ham radio, really quickly, there's a couple of different things you can do with ham radio. You can talk on the radio just like you would normally talk into like a cell phone, so you can just pick up a microphone and say, testing, testing, talk, 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 and you can just talk into a microphone. Or they actually have digital equipment, and this may actually interest some of you out there, because this is more related to like actually computers. So basically what you do is you have an actual radio, so you still have the radio part, but the radio is actually going into a computer, and then you have this program that pretty much translates all these weird codes into actually readable text. So it's pretty much like you're texting on your phone or you're in a chat room, and that's the digital side of amateur radio. So if you want to do voice, you can do voice, just picking up and talking in mic, or you can do digital. And at our field day, we had digital, and pretty much when it comes to field day, anything pretty much nothing is off limits. We even had one station at Field Day that was actually transmitting through a satellite, because there is satellite communications when it comes to Field Day, and I thought that was very cool. Unfortunately, I didn't get to be on the air because this person had to control everything when it comes to that, but they did get to do that, and I thought that was very cool. The person actually had like a mobile antenna, and they were actually moving it around as they had like a walkie-talkie in their hand, because there is mobile, different ways, different radios out there. There's mobiles, there's base stations, and there's walkie-talkies that look pretty much like walkie-talkies. And he had this walkie-talkie with a big antenna out, and he was holding it in his hand while he had the walkie-talkie in his other hand, and he was trying to pick up this satellite. And I thought that was absolutely cool, waiting for this satellite to come across America and trying to see if we can hit this satellite that only comes across America every 15 minutes. And all those ways of transmitting do count towards Field Day contacts, which I thought was pretty cool. And then we also had, of course, Morse code. Morse code is a big part of amateur radio, so we did have some Morse code stations out. We didn't have a lot of Morse code stations out, but we did have Morse code, and Morse code is pretty cool, just hearing them trying to hit key codes and trying to actually send Morse code. And it was just, overall, it was a very cool experience. Overall, a lot of guys there were trying to get me interested into the hobby. I do admit, after being on the air, I do want to become an amateur radio operator. Overall, Field Day was a success, and I just wanted to talk about it because I'm just really excited to be on the air talking and things like that. So most likely I'm going to be getting my first ever amateur radio license. That's why I'm making this video. Pretty much my whole aspect of amateur radio changed when I went to Field Day this weekend, and that's why I made this video. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.